Hi guys and gals, today we're going to talk about the squat, but we're not going to use a bar or a dumbbell. All we have is a resistance band. I already have a video about the squat. I go into the details that you have to keep in mind about your own body and how you should position the bar and everything else about the variations. We're not going to go through every detail in this video as well, but I'm going to put the link up in this video so you're going to check that video out. So it's going to be easier for you to understand this video. There are pros and cons in using a resistance band over other resistance tools like dumbbells, barbells, kettlebells, and plates, and etc. etc. I'm gonna mention a few of them, and then after that you're gonna choose based on your goals. First of all, it's really good to learn exercises with resistance bands. If you're new to exercises, specifically compound movements like the squat, deadlifts, and exercises that are really hard to understand, when you're using a resistance band, it's going to be easier. Second of all, it's going to be safer, specifically with squats, because you do not have a weight on yourself. So you know that if you get tired or fatigued or lose your balance, you just sit down and the resistance is going to be gone. Third, you don't need to worry about the balance. So you're not going to move around by the bar. It's just a resistance band. It's around your shoulder, so there is nothing to be worried about the balance. Another thing is that when you're using a resistance band, it's gonna be easier when you go down because it's gonna be less stretch. So the resistance band increases its resistance when it's more stretch. So in this case, when you're doing a squat, when you go down, it's gonna be easier. And if you've got flexibility issues, for example, if you've got tightness in your calf and you just cannot perform a squat correctly and you just come on your toes because they are just too tight, or you just push the hip back, or any other flexibility issues, it's going to be easier on your body and it's going to be safer again, because as you go into that hard position, it's not going to be with a lot of resistance, so it's just going to be your own body weight, and as you come up and have more stability and flexibility, it's going to increase the resistance. So it's going to be again good for people who have flexibility issues, or they lack that mind muscle connection and they do not know how to position themselves, so it's going to be easier. But at the same time, you've got to consider that it's not going to be that much challenging as well, because you get a lot of your power and strength when you're in that phase of the exercise when it's the hardest. So if you go down and you do not have any resistance, it's not going to be that much challenging for the muscle. So if you're a little bit more advanced, try to use barbells and dumbbells more than resistance band, because you're going to target the full range of motion more. But again, you still can use resistance bands, especially for doing any supersets, or if you want to do drop sets, it's going to be really easy to do with resistance band, because you can just use multiple bands, and as you got fatigued, just release one band and do the other ones. But if you're trying to do a squat and you want to do drop sets, you just need to unrack a lot of weight and it's going to take a long period. Anyway, still you can use both of those resistance tools with each other. So you can use a band while holding a dumbbell, so it's going to be hard when you go down as well. Another restriction that resistance bands have is that you need to go a little bit wide. So if you take a narrow stance, because as the band gets stretched, it's going to be tougher, it might bring your feet off the ground and it's just going to be bad. So for you to keep the balance, you need to take a wider stance, and for you to be able to do that properly, you need to point the toes out as well. So make sure you're not doing the exercise like this. Point the toes a little bit out. It's going to be anatomically correct and you're going to have more stability when you're doing it. So let's jump into the bands and talk about the variations and things that you should consider while doing the exercise. So As mentioned, we're gonna go a little bit wide, so we have more stability. The first thing you should do is that you've got to consider the length of the band. So if the band is thick and really hard to perform the exercise with, you can make it a little bit easier by pre-stretching the band. So you stretch the band a little bit first and then put your feet on it. So as you see, the band is a little bit straight, so the length on the outer part is more. So when the length on the outer part is more, it's gonna be easier, and vice versa. If you want to make it a little bit harder, instead of stretching, make sure it's loose inside. So now the length on the outer part is less, so the resistance is gonna be more because it's gonna be stretched more. So anyway, we're gonna start with the normal length as the beginning. So another thing that you should consider is where you put the band. So make sure the band is not too much close to your toes or too much back close to your heels. So if you consider that this is your feet, do not put it here or here. Put the band in the middle so it doesn't raise you from any side. And as mentioned, make sure the toes are pointed out a little bit. So for you to begin the exercise, you need to sit down. You bring the band back on your shoulder blades. Make sure it's not on your neck. I talked about it in my squat video as well. Make sure you put it in your on top of your shoulder blades. So you can put your arms here or here and add a little bit more resistance with your elbow. So if you push it out, it's gonna be harder. And all you need to do is just up, down, up, down. Again, make sure the band is not on your neck. Put it on your shoulder blades. And another thing that you should consider is that when you're putting the band on yourself, make sure the band is stretched the same way on both sides. So sometimes one side might be having more length and it can cause a little bit of imbalance when you're doing it like that. As mentioned in the squat video, the knee, hip, and the chest should move simultaneously. So the band or the bar is in the middle of your body, so like a straight line. So do not push the chest forward or push the hip back too much or bend the knee too much forward. Make sure they move with each other. The variation that I like to do with the bands when it comes to the squat is wide stance squats. First of all, it's gonna be harder than the normal squat with resistance band because again you're pre-stretching the back. So you're making the length on the other part smaller. Second of all, you're gonna have more stability, so you're not gonna bring the feet in and cave in the knees. So it's gonna be harder from the beginning and you're gonna have more stability when you come up. When it comes to the resistance bands, when you're doing the squat, if the band is really hard for you to do the exercise with, you do not need to come all the way up. So if you just go down and come here and go down, you're still using those muscles and you're still doing a squat in a good way. So do not worry if you cannot come all the way up. With the squat, the more you come up and the more you're upright, the muscles that are getting used in your legs are gonna be less. So do not worry about that. Make sure the lower part is more under emphasis.